Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deanna Blackwood. I'm the NACD Stewardship and Education Coordinator, and today I'll be moderating the breakout entitled Engaging Farmers in Conservation Conversation. In today's session, Benton County Soil and Water Conservation District and America Farmland Trust will share their experiences creating outreach programs that boost farmer engagement and trust, creating effective conservation adoption. Our presenters are Leslie Fisher with Benton County Soil Water Conservation District and Ashley Brucker with American Farmland Trust. Leslie Fisher is a resource conservation specialist at the Benton County, Indiana Soil and Water Conservation District. She also serves as the coordinator for the Big Pine Creek Watershed, an 85% agricultural land use project focus area located in Northwest Indiana. Leslie works closely with farmers, landowners, agriculture businesses, local community members, and other invested groups to address natural resource concerns, build continuous partnerships, and get conservation on the ground. Leslie is a member of the Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy State Planning Team, a Soil and Water Conservation Society, Hoosier Chapter Council member, and serves on the Ag Advisory Council for the Wabash Heartland Innovation Network. Leslie is also a recipient of Field to Market's 2020 Advisor Spotlight Award. Leslie loves being involved in her local community and enjoys spending outdoors time with her family, especially in the Big Pine Creek. Our second presenter, Ashley, she is with the Ohio Ag Steward. She's an Ohio Ag Stewardship Manager with the FAT. She's dedicated to building and maintaining relationships with farmers and non-operating farmland owners, as well as state and federal agencies, agricultural service providers, conservation leaders, and others to develop and implement strategies to facilitate adoption of conservation practices on farmland. Ashley leads women learning circles through FAT's National Women for the Land Initiative, manages the Dairy Supply Chain Initiative, and guides the communication and outreach plans for ag conservation innovation projects. I'd like to welcome Leslie and Ashley, and real quick remind our guests that both our presenters are online to answer your questions during their presentations in the chat box. Ladies, I'll pass the floor to you now.
Thanks, Deanna. Appreciate the introductions. I'm excited to be here today and share about lessons that we've learned in farmer engagement. So a quick backstory to kind of understand where this information is coming from. So I work on the Big Pine Creek Watershed project. And so that's located in Northwest Indiana between Indianapolis and Chicago. It covers 4 different counties, a little over 200,000 acres. And if you're familiar with HUCs or hydrologic unit codes, it's basically a HUC 8. So the Big Pine Creek Watershed project actually flows into the Wabash River. And the importance of that and kind of a backstory to how all of this project began and all the farmer engagement we're doing at this point is the Wabash River has been slated to be approximately 1% of the land area of the Mississippi River Basin, but it actually contributes approximately 11% of the nutrients that are contributing to the Gulf hypoxia. And so a backstory really to how all these initiatives began. Back in 2007, the Indiana Nature Conservancy initiated a study of the Wabash River due to that statistic, kind of looking for somewhere to start some major project work. And by 2010, they comprised a list of priority subwatersheds that were flowing into the Wabash River. And so our Big Pine Creek watershed is approximately a little over 80% row crop agriculture. And there's quite a few local interested partners. And so as a result of that, they decided that it would be a good place to start investing some time and money and resources into doing some major agricultural conservation efforts. So From this project, we're about 5 years in now. So this is over about a 5-year time period of some of these lessons we've learned in engaging our farmers. And so the 4 main areas for farmer engagement include through partnerships, project opportunities, tailored and personalized approach, and through incentives, which is a pretty typical one for all projects really. And so for partnerships, in Indiana, we're fortunate that myself being a Soil and Water Conservation District employee, we're naturally a part of the Indiana Conservation Partnership. And so with that, we kind of already have a slate of different entities that we get to partner with, from our district association to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, our local DNR, quite a few that really we automatically work with. So the Watershed project, though, also is able to pair with other conservation partners. So we work with the Wabash River Enhancement Corporation, which is a corporation close to Purdue University in Lafayette, a nearby city, that's consistently basically improving things along the Wabash. The Nature Conservancy, who is probably one of our largest partners, and then also a local land trust. And then we also are fortunate to have Conservation Technology Information Center, or CTIC, in our backyard. So these are kind of our, our standard partner slate, which has worked out well. But this slide right here kind of explains basically the pathway that we took to really look for some more creative partnerships to increase farmer engagement. Because those are just kind of standard partners that I've already discussed about that we already work with. And so this is a slide, I share this slide all the time, I love it. So this is from Dr. Linda Perkope from Purdue University. And so it's basically, they surveyed different farmers and asked about how influential different groups were. And so looking at this, understandably, the most influence on the farmers on their agricultural practices and strategies are family. That makes sense, especially a lot of, generational family farms. So you're working with, grandpa, dad, son, talking and making decisions. Next is their chemical dealer, followed by their seed dealer, or maybe their crop consultant. And so, those all make a lot of sense. But what's pretty sad to look at on this is you look all the way over at who is the least influential in ag practice strategies and decisions for farmers. And that's conservation staff. So obviously the space that I fall in, the different partners who, have been working hard to increase conservation in this area. And so as a result of that, one of our largest grants that we work on, which is the NRCS, or Natural Resource Conservation Services, RCPP. It's a regional conservation partnership program in which you have kind of a series of odd or different partners that come together to get funds to help farmers put conservation on the ground. And so based on kind of that information from that slide from Dr. Perkope, what we found really is partnerships that are specifically focusing on the agricultural section are huge, because really the ag sector is that farmer facing group, right? Our government offices or, different organizations and nonprofits aren't necessarily who they naturally would be working with. And so we've paired with Series Solutions, and then they also have and work directly with Land O'Lakes as well, part of their Sustain unit, kind of a newer program. And so they've really been a key partner in kind of designing how we've went about conservation outreach and farmer engagement in a different manner. So some other agricultural partners that have really worked out to basically get closer to the farmers are cover crop seed dealers. They're working with the farmers all the time, so I can consistently call upon them and understand, has it been a really hard spring for cover crop termination? What do I really need to know about on the ground to then communicate with farmers better? When myself, and I'm sure lots of us, are stuck in the office a little more than we would prefer. Non-GMO seed salesmen. So in order to make a lot of the non-GMO crops for this area, I'm primarily working with corn and soybean for this territory. And so, some of those non-GMO, like corn, for example, really need conservation added into their management system in order to make those work. So partnering and working with those salesmen all the time is really important, because their clients are consistently utilizing, particularly cover crops, and a lot of no-till as well. Ag equipment companies, I have farmers who come to us all the time who are interested in doing projects, but they don't really have access to the type of equipment that they would need. So we've worked with different companies to kind of encourage the local equipment dealers on really what they need to have available for our farmers to succeed successfully. Purdue is in our backyard, Purdue University, which is exciting. So we can partner with them quite a bit with all of their agricultural researchers and resources. Local Farm Bureau, they've been huge. You know, farmers in this area, in this watershed, I have to stress too, is very, very rural. So hopefully a lot of these can apply to your urban areas you're working as well, but this is a very rural and small community that this watershed project is actively working in. Farmland Realtor, this one's kind of interesting. I just happened to partner with this person. I know they're working with farmers all the time, and sit down with them and find a way we could work together. And so basically every time they go to sell land, which happens, a lot of the generations are done farming and the family has inherited it and decided to sell it off. And so every time he's getting new purchasers of land that falls within the watershed territory, he connects me with them to basically talk through them about different program options and kind of a conservation plan moving forward with their new land to make it the most valuable and the best it really can be. Purdue Extension we work with, and then of course our local FFA chapters. For here, it's really important in the smaller community that even if they're not a direct farmer, that basically the community is involved. And as part of bringing them in so that we can have support for the project that we're doing, we inadvertently have ended up with farmers involved in these different community organizations who then we can get closer with, build relationships and trust, and then work more towards conservation goals and more adoption in the area. And so some of the examples of these community partnerships include our women landowners. I know American Farmland Trust does a lot on this. I'm sure Ashley Brucker will touch on this as well in a minute. But the women landowners, we do women's learning circles in which you get together these women. A lot of them have inherited farmland. Some of them have actively been involved in the farm. Others haven't, which you focus on specific conservation goals. And it's a smaller subset and group. And so people are more free to ask questions and learn about the resources. For here, the northern half of our watershed is predominantly agricultural, and then the southern part is actually very wooded and a lot of paddlers and recreators on our streams. And so we've involved them. It's kind of more of an education of them understanding what's going on the ag side, and vice versa. The farmers we're working with understanding, you know, some of the recreators and homeowners down on the creek in the southern part. So we partner with them on different events as well. We've had church fellowship organizations in which they're looking to understand, you know, good things that are going on in the area. And so I'll go in and speak, and our partners go in and talk about what we're doing. And as a result of that, our large farmer base, you know, are involved in these fellowship organizations, and we've been able to connect with them in a different manner and build relationships kind of through their, you know, other community organizations that they're involved with, not just because they're a farmer. We focused on historical groups as well, partnering with. You know, a lot of people have an interest in the history. We've had some exciting things, you know, between wars that have happened, you know, passing through on the creek, or Native American history. And so we focused on that and combined it with the work we're doing, just again, to find different ways to reach farmers, not just, you know, calling them directly from the government office that I'm housed in. We work with a lot of garden groups. There's a lot of farmers who actually are really interested in the pollinator plantings for the edges of their field. And so, you know, we found ways to really link those resources and farmers together. And then our economic development in the area is interested in, of course, anything that's bringing attention to the area. So we'll partner with them to kind of share our story, and again, just reach a different subset of folks. And along with our elected officials, and then our community foundation, which, if you're not familiar with community foundations, I know, like, particularly for our small community, we have a lot of farmers who donate funds to different community events here through the community foundation. And the foundation also offers us a lot of resources on succession planning. So what happens to the farmers' fields once they pass away, who's it going to go to, and how is it going to be split up? And so as a part of a lot of those sessions that they'll host pretty regularly in the area, we'll have a presenting role in that, and basically express to them, you know, as part of that handing down process, have you really thought about and considered, you know, your soil health? You know, the other important piece is to keep that farm in the best shape possible for generations down the road. And so that's kind of where we found a good fit with all the types of community ways to outreach to farmers. Other ways that we've found farmer engagement to work are through continuous project opportunities. Specifically, we do quite a few different projects from researches and other things as well, but I want to talk specifically to field to market and their field print calculator and field print platforms. So if you haven't heard of them, I do encourage you to look it up and see if there maybe is some opportunity for your organization to get involved with them. But basically, I was approached by some entities which connect with Field to Market. And as part of these projects, you're sitting down with farmers one-on-one. So you're getting them to commit to sit down with you and working them through this calculator that basically spits out a score evaluating their management and what it's like related to their conservation level. And so as a part of that, that was a project that as the district we signed on to and got a financial incentive, as did the farmer for being a part of it. It was just how our project specifically was set up. But what was really neat was as a result of that project, the farmers actually enjoyed it so much and expressed to me, I've never sat down and evaluated our farms in this kind of manner. And then we did, 3 continuous years of that project. And so you're consistently, working with, there was, deliverables. And so you're working with directly these farmers and sitting down with them every year and watching as they're changing through their management, and also able to connect them with resources and different cost share opportunities or new projects and research that was going on, because they were consistently coming in to sit down and work through this system. And so that was another really good opportunity to build those relationships and have more engagement directly with the farmers. So other ways for it is a tailored and personalized approach. And so I have to say, those that know and work with me know this is probably my favorite area. My focus is a lot on community development and kind of maybe the more sociological side behind why farmers would be interested in conservation. And so I've had this question a lot on how we found our farmers and kind of built our base for people interested in conservation and moving forward and making large change in the area. And so I encourage others, and this is different in every community exactly what it looks like, but yet very similar. Find your local coffee shop, that's the farmer hangout, and find a way to become a part of that circle. So I know for here, each of the small towns in our small community have a place that every morning, or like in my southern county, it's afternoon coffee, that they come together and share what's going on. It's just kind of their own social hour. And so slowly, if you go in there and join and get to know folks, it's just a whole nother way, even for learning to understand, that season, that struggle of that year, our price is down, when you're actively engaged, directly within their social atmosphere, honestly. Farm Bureau meetings, I know I touched on them as a partner earlier. We have a very high enrollment in our local Farm Bureau. That entity protects a lot of their rights, and so they're very farmer facing. So if you can co with them on meetings in any kind of capacity to help out and do joint things, I know they enjoy partnering, at least here locally, which is nice. Local co-ops, some of them kind of have their own hangout area. And they have different events. A lot of them, like our Series Solutions, has a knowledge event every fall. I didn't originally have a strong agronomic background, so attending those were incredible for learning, but also, if you're the person in the forward face to the one working with the farmers or recruiting them, if you consistently are at all these events that your farmers are at, they're going to get to know you and you're going to get to know them, building relationships, and therefore making it so much simpler for each of you to trust each other to move forward in different projects. Local fairs, we do a lot at our fair because it's a high farmer spot for ours. Our community farmers market, the American Legion for here tends to be kind of an evening farmer hotspot, so it's another place. Part meetings, for us, those are held by our Purdue Extension, and it's a pesticide applicators recertification program. And so our farmers mandatorily need that course. They need so many so often. And so I found that if I can just get a quick speaking plug about different conservation options that are available in the middle of those park courses, a lot of times they're looking for speakers to add to those because they have to be so long. And the farmers are forced to sit through it because it's a certification. So that has probably been my #1 way to reach farmers that that would not be a farmer subset that would be interested in like regularly coming in and asking questions in our government office. Things to consider. So again, much easier for a rural community, but you can apply this as you build your relationships and learn people, one-on-one that you're working with in your territory. But definitely consider the farming season schedule. I know, like when we were doing our field to market project, they worked with us to tailor things. As I learned, if you're trying to get a farmer to come in and sit during your planting and harvest time, it's just not going to work out, and they're going to get overwhelmed even if they try to make it work. It's just not fair to their type of schedule. Kind of understanding their workload really helps out to make things more adaptable and make the relationships grow a little bit better. Family considerations, I I keep thinking of the same farmer who came in and told me they want to do cover crops, and it's been 5 years. But it's a small community, I know they lost a family member, another family, then they had triplets. Just taking all of that into consideration, because if you're going to try to, sell your conservation to somebody and it's a high stress time for them, likely, they're just going to be bothered by you and not want to engage any further. And also, if you're fortunate enough to have a good memory, which I am not necessarily, but I try to keep personalized record tracking of exact conversations that I really left off with each farmer. And then I kind of know where to pick up at as time goes on. The last time they thought about no-till, but they were still wanting to do a lot of tiling projects. And the next time I know, I can pick up right from there, are you still interested in it? Did you get all your tiling caught up you want to do? It kind of gives you a place to start with instead of starting all over in the beginning with your conversation. And the last one, for different ways to engage farmers are incentives. So conservation technical assistance, which if you are at all in the Natural Resource Conservation Service or NRCS world, you hear this a lot, or CTA. But basically, not every farmer wants necessarily cost share or money for an incentive, but they want someone to physically go out there and help them. And a lot of times that comes from your local co-ops, like what we're doing with Series. So even if you're not the person as part of your organization or nonprofit or agency to be that, being able to friend enough people or work closely enough with different partners to find somebody who can be that person to offer them technical assistance, whether it's wildlife related or cover crop related, that's super helpful. That way they know that they can still come to you for anything they need, and you'll at least be able to find them a resource for helping with it, even if you're not necessarily that person. Recognition. We have been fortunate enough, again, mostly working through the Field to Market program with their group. But anytime there's potential to nominate a farmer, I know for Indiana, we also have a program where we can, do a Farmer of the Year. That has been huge. Any of those farmers that I have, taken that extra 40 minutes to write up some kind of recommendation for, and then put it in the paper and they get an award. And some of our guys have got to fly for free, to go to receive the award in another state, but it really sticks with them. And it's not a profession where they necessarily get rewarded that often, right? Farmers don't have some, corporate award that they're a part of all the time. And so that's been really a huge thing in helping to build those relationships and engaging with them. And then of course, cost share, which tends to be, in a very common way for engaging with farmers and incentivizing them. And so I want to break that down just a little bit further. So with our project, with the Big Pine Creek Watershed project, we've been fortunate enough to have, over $6 million come through the door in different types of funding. And I know not everyone is fortunate enough to have that, but if you end up in these situations, we've kind of found that different funding works better to engage with the farmers. So if you have cost share and you have like a short-term funding pocket, so, maybe something that's came through your environmental agency, for Indiana, it would be like our IDEM or Indiana Department of Environmental Management, or we have some DNR, like Lake and River Enhancement Funds here. So things that are, just short term, you might have them, year, 3 years max, and you can offer the farmer, like a one-time, 1-year deal. Those we've really found work out well, especially when you're just running them through maybe just your agency and not having to involve other partners. Rookies work best for that, rookie farmers, folks that are pretty impatient, but they want to try some, people who are indecisive, ones who might have commitment issues. I call some of them my retirement preppers. Every year they're like, I don't know if I want to do anything because I'm just about to retire, even though I don't really believe most of them. But they don't want to commit to something long-term quite yet. Or an imbalance in management. We've got a lot of people who just struggle a lot with their farm management because time constraints, lack of resources, maybe financially, or even I have a lot of people who struggle with management who are, 12,000 plus acres and they've got employees going every which direction and they just can't throw one more thing into the management. And so if you have access to any of those short-term funds that you can secure, that really works out with kind of this subset or type of farmer. Our long-term funding, so I'm talking more about maybe a 3-year program or a 5-year program or even a 10-year program. So a lot of these, of course, are kind of coming through the United States Department of Agriculture or USDA programs through NRCS or the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So common ones are EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or CSP, which is the Conservation Stewardship Program. And so, if you've got a farmer who kind of already has some experience in programs, maybe they've done some of the short-term ones with you for a year or two, and you think they're comfortable and ready, they're already excellent farm managers, they have small manageable acres, they're bored. I have guys who honestly come in here and feel like they've achieved everything, they're in a good place financially, they've got some time, and they want to try something. Some that are a little naturally progressive fall in this category, and those that are patient. And I would say patience is definitely the thing. If anything, I would not put them in these programs unless you know that they've got some patience to work through the process of being involved in these types of cost shares. And then private funding. So for us, we worked with the Nature Conservancy and Field to Market, and we were able to get some funds like from Coca-Cola and some private businesses. And those really work well for your farmers who are just really, really worried about committing to anything. Maybe they're already a little anti-government, they have some trust issues, they've had a poor experience in the past with trying some conservation or working with agencies or organizations doing that, timing issues, and maybe aren't the best communicators. Those private funds don't have as many check boxes behind them in the paperwork, and it just works out much better. And so, it kind of works out well that if you do have access to these type of funds, you can maybe start them in private funding, do some of the short-term funding, and then move them to the long-term. But we found that keeping those relationships and building them with the farmers and keeping them engaged, it's really important to make sure that we do the best job of getting them kind of in the correct category. So I would definitely want to end on that the most important part of engaging farmers in general is building that trust. And whether it's through the partnerships or incentive work you're doing, if you're not someone who's really working at the field level scale, I would highly encourage you that you have someone that's working, on the ground with the farmers directly and being, one solid face to build that trust in order to really achieve all of that farmer engagement. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ashley Brucker with American Farmland Trust.
Thank you, Leslie. So like Leslie just discussed, in-person engagement is the most powerful means of establishing and building relationships, especially in our agricultural community. But what do you do when that's just not possible? Due to current circumstances, we have to reevaluate effective outreach to our ag communities by capitalizing on our use of virtual mediums, something the teams at American Farmland Trust have been working on mastering. So really quick, for those watching who are not familiar with American Farmland Trust, we were founded in 1980 by Peggy Rockefeller, who recognized the threat against American farmland. She organized a group of farmers and conservationists to address this threat. And this group became a national nonprofit with a focus on preserving farmland primarily through the use of easements. American Farmland Trust currently has 3 distinct parts of their mission and achieve these through a variety of programs and initiatives designed to serve specific regions. These include Farms Under Threat, Farmland for the Next Generation, Women for the Land, and Ag Conservation Innovations. Now, Ag Conservation Innovations is an initiative where we strive to identify innovative projects to further conservation by targeting unique and underserved ag communities and agricultural practices through focusing on communication and outreach, such as effectively transitioning from in-person events and outreach to entirely virtual gatherings. So why virtual? The most glaring is health and safety. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many of us to change how we do everything. That includes education and outreach about conservation and agriculture. 9 months ago, many of us probably thought we would just cancel or delay our events until later. But it quickly became evident that in order to continue our work in conservation, virtual outreach was going to be necessary. Finally, virtual options have afforded the flexibility that so many people desire and need. A lot of people who were not previously able to attend events due to work schedules, family obligations, or location are able to do so now online. But planning for a virtual event, you have to take some things into consideration. A lot of these considerations are the same that you would have thought about for your in-person events or your in-person meetings. As before, we must consider our audience. Understanding if you are targeting conservation professionals who will want to participate between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, is very different than farmers and landowners who have varied schedules. And that's going to be paramount to success. Like Leslie said earlier, think about your outreach during harvest season, planting season, family obligations, off-farm work schedules that a lot of people have. These can all impact availability of your audience and maybe your presenters as well. The number of participants is also going to have an impact on whether you require a large webinar that is maybe a one-way conversation or one-way information sharing like we're doing now, or if your group would benefit more from a discussion or a small group meeting. Think about location as well. Like I said, maybe some people won't be able to attend, but they can tune in later on. So you might want to record something. Think about availability to internet access and also the relevance of your topic to the area that you are having people join you from. Finally, we have to consider age, gender, race, and background of your audience. Because let's face it, the industry has been changing for a long time, and resource providers like AFT need to change with it. Today, a wider and wider variety of people find themselves in a leadership position on a farm. There is no longer a stereotypical farmer. Farm and landowners include people of color, women, and are often multi-generational. Some own or co-own land they lease. Others are the grain farmer, leasing land from someone else. Farms are located in the urban areas of our biggest cities to the rural areas in the farthest reaches of this country. For many, farming is a whole new realm. And when they find themselves in that position, they need resources. Many farmers lean on the availability of workshops for networking and learning, but for our more diverse members, they experience something completely different. Being cognizant of the experience and backgrounds of your audience allows you to offer wider and more varied outreach opportunities to accommodate a whole host of needs. We started this many years ago when we identified the needs for women's learning circles with the help of the Women Food and Ag Network, and we continue it through our virtual learning. Even in the virtual setting, you can encourage your participants to build a network of support for each other. So let's talk about technology for just a minute. After identifying your audience, you need to take a few minutes to consider not only your use of technology, but theirs as well. Like I said, high-speed internet is not widely available across the country. This is true in both your rural areas and your urban areas. Tech savviness is another thing to consider, their know-how, and it can definitely be a limiting factor. And finally, please keep in mind time limitations and just how long a human can stare at a screen. Ask yourself if this virtual event could be equally productive as a phone call or a teleconference, or if you're just sharing information, maybe it could be an email that you send out to folks. The final part of the planning stage is your purpose in holding this event. Disseminating large amounts of information is likely going to be best suited to a webinar, such as we are doing now. These events allow for a large audience, a recorded format to access at a later time, and presentations to showcase various talking points. A discussion-based format where idea sharing and networking in a conversational setting would be best suited to a meeting. Remember, your online event can still be benefited by demonstrations, farm tours, panel discussions, participant discussions. Don't let the fact that you're online limit you to thinking through how these can work for you. We have had great success with farm tours recorded on iPhones, flake demos on the kitchen table, complete with cat visitors who drink out of the water jar, everything that makes an in-person event really great. You can figure out a way, and others have figured out ways to make them impactful online. Except barbecue, pork, and green bean lunches. I haven't figured that one out yet. I'm working on it. We'll see what I can do. To help guide you in making these decisions, there's lots of resources out there. I worked with a team of very experienced virtual outreach and engagement professionals in developing a new publication called Reaching Women in Agriculture, a Guide for Virtual Engagement. It is targeted towards women in ag, but it has a lot of really great parts that can help anyone in developing an online virtual event, such as this flowchart that we have here that can kind of help you decide if you should be having a meeting or a webinar. So your virtual platform options there's so many of them. I've listed 3 of the most common ones here. They all have their benefits and their limitations, and you really need to think about your audience, your purpose, and the technology available when deciding which one of these you want to go with. So we've got Teams that has widely available to Microsoft Office users, designed for professionals. There's no time limits, but be cautious if anyone in your group is an Apple iOS user. And there can be video issues for folks who don't have Microsoft Office. Zoom, we all know Zoom. I think it's turned into a verb at this point. It's very versatile. It's widely accessible, it's easy to use, but there can be time limitations. If you are on the free version, you have to be aware of some security issues, and there can be limitations to some government computer users in hosting these events. And of course, Skype, let's not forget about that. That was one that was out there and being used before a lot of these others became mainstream. So there's some high comfort level there for many people. It's also very versatile. It can, just like the others, have some glitchy issues or sound issues. So just be thinking through those when planning your outreach. The other part of effective outreach is facilitation. And that comes down to 3 key parts: agenda design and preparation, facilitating the actual event, and evaluations and feedback. So in our agenda design and preparation, we lay the groundwork for our event. Agendas are more important than ever. Unlike live events where you can steal a little time from a break or run over your allotted presentation time, virtual events typically don't have that flexibility. Facilitator agendas for the facilitator and presenters can provide a detailed description of who is talking and outline their topic, as well as include additional notes for presenters to be ready for screen share when what facilitator loses their connection, and more. A participant agenda allows those watching to know what to expect. Just as you need to allow time for people to come in and get settled and find their seats in person, you need to allow time for your participants to get connected, turn on or off their videos, and check their audio. Incorporate short breaks for longer sessions, just as you would in person, and keep in mind that this is likely not their only virtual call this week or even this day. Again, avoid video fatigue by considering multiple short sessions across a few days as opposed to one very long session in a full day. Once again, ask yourself if this really needs to be a virtual session or if it could be a normal phone call, teleconference, or email. Really, the most important is to practice. We're all guilty of shooting from the hip and improvising presentations the day of the event. But remember, when you do that, you typically have the audience to play off of or other presenters. You don't usually have that benefit when you're online. So just be prepared. Now, when we're in the actual event, we want to start by agreeing on ground rules so everyone is on the same page. My favorite is to never, ever, ever take technology to the bathroom during the event, ever, no exceptions. Ground rules allow people to know if you expect their cameras to be on the entire time, or if they will be in charge of unmuting themselves, or if the facilitator will control that feature. It also guides people in the options for participation, like asking questions or making comments.
Let folks know the plan for tech issues. If the facilitator is kicked off or loses audio for some reason, you want people to know if the meeting will continue and how. Identify a co-facilitator and their role. My best co-facilitator is a colleague who monitors the chat box by answering questions, sharing relevant links, addressing tech issues, all of that behind the scenes work that sometimes can't go on if you are actively engaged in presenting or facilitating. Finally, monitor for participant cues. These may look a bit different in a virtual setting, but with your co-facilitator, you can watch and cue in on those non-verbal cues that are still present. For example, someone may have a question or want to add to the conversation by taking themselves off mute or turning on their camera. And you might be losing your audience if everyone's camera is off and everyone is muted. Obviously, these only apply to interactive small group meeting sessions and not something like a webinar. But if you're in that situation, consider ending your screen share and just talking for a bit. Ask questions, get feedback while you are in that moment so you can bring everybody back in again. And finally, feedback is paramount to improving your outreach and offering your audience what is most valuable to them. You can use links in the chat box to direct people to surveys before they sign off the chat, or excuse me, before they sign off the session. Like I said earlier, you can ask people questions in the session to make it more interactive and pull them into the conversation. You can do this live, like we are talking, or you can use in-session polls. A lot of the formats allow you to preload questions that you can ask during the session. And don't forget about follow-up emails. You can send out the survey link again and let people know how important this survey is in developing outreach and resources for them. All of these are really great by themselves. You will get the most success if you use them all together. That is, until we figure out a way to hold people hostage and not allow them their dessert until they finish the survey, but that's kind of in the same realm of development as my barbecue lunch. So I'm still working on it. But I just want everyone to keep in mind, virtual engagement really is as unique to each occurrence as in-person events always were. Do what works best for you and those you are serving. It will never entirely replace the type of one-on-one personal engagement and relationship building like Leslie is so amazing at doing. But until we can experience that again, this is an option to allow us to continue our work in conservation. Also, please consider how virtual engagement can augment your outreach by allowing flexibility and access to future events. Thank you.
Lastly, and Ashley, thank you both for your presentation, and thank you for sharing with all of us your own ways and strategies of how to build those strong and continuous relationships and partnerships with farmers in your local community, especially in these days with the pandemic, when we had to adapt and think out of the box and come up with different ways to continue to keep the farmers engaged in the virtual world. So I'm hoping and I think our participants learned a lot of information from you and got some tips and tricks to implement in their own virtual meetings and sessions. So thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your experiences. In the end, I'd like to encourage our guests to go back to our meeting agenda and pick up the next session that they would like to attend. Thank you and have a great day.